One of my dream to open a new leak, database leak, and don't find presidential names there. It never happened before.
That would be your happy ending, to open a leak and there's no president in the data.
No president, and see, like, I have nothing to do. Because every leak, every president.
Czech Center for Investigative Reporting and Dark Riviera present Protagonista, a war room content project hosted by Pavla Holcová. Protagonista puts investigative reporters at the heart of the story. Anna Babinets is a Ukrainian investigative journalist whose career intimately follows the political developments of her country. Her first big break came when the corrupt President Yanukovych fled to Russia after the Revolution of Dignity, and Anna and her colleagues managed to save thousands of documents proving his misdeeds. So Anna, how did you venture into investigative reporting? Because you are doing it for already some time, and you founded in 2012, you co-founded your investigative media called Slidstvo. So what was the beginning?
The beginning in investigative journalism was in 2008. So
you've been like 10 years old.
Something like this. No, actually before that I worked as a reporter for politics. I was going to parliament, talking to politicians, and it was pretty boring for me. I was working for a news magazine, for some newspapers. And then one Ukrainian journalist who just established an investigative agency, first investigative agency, he invited me to work as for investigations about army. It was a little bit crazy by that time because Ukrainian army in 2009, it was like nothing. No one cares how it worked. But I start to figure out what's going on with aviation, what's going on with property of army. And it was really interesting to operate with something, not talking to politicians, but it was not very popular. Because Ukrainian army, really, people didn't want to know what's going on because we didn't know that we will have the war with Russia, and people just Soviet army or something. But it was interesting for me. Then I worked as reporter on TV. It was an investigative TV program in Ukraine. And then with my colleague Dmitro Gnap, we decided that we want to create some investigative agency doing investigations because we already had sources. We already had it was like we were like underground journalists, not a lot of people were watching and reading our stories. And politicians didn't care about our stories. So we mostly looked like crazy people who just tried to find something, for what, who knew. I just felt that it's interesting to find something which some big people try to hide. That was like game for me. We didn't have money. We didn't have anything, just...
You have the dedication to investigative reporting and you have experience, right?
Yes.
So you went with Dmitro Gnap and founded Slidstvo, and you just got into some really important, really interesting stories. For example, the end of Yanukovych and the project Yanukovych Leaks. So, February 2014.
Yeah.
How did you learn that Yanukovych fled the country?
Every day I worked on Maidan in the main square where protests happened, and it was morning, 6 a.m. I remember that one of my friends was killed in Maidan, and it was a ceremony of memorial in the morning, and I was sitting next to the Maidan, and then someone called me or texted me because I got a lot of messages that Yanukovych left. It was like 6:30 a.m. And my first decision was I should go to his residence. because, his residence, Yanukovych residence, is next to Kiev, like 20 kilometers from Kiev, very good road for him, especially because in Ukraine, generally, we don't have good road. And for many years before that, it was very interesting and important place for journalists because we used all his money, mostly corrupted money. It was the place where he accumulated all interesting stuff.
So could you tell me the place is called Medjugorje. So when you first got in, he fled the country and I guess he didn't let the gates open. You needed to somehow get in.
Yeah, but actually, when I came there, it was a lot of people around already. Some civilians, they organized kind of security around. It's a very big place, actually. But I was from Gromadzki TV. It was very popular. I just came there. It was a lot of local people and other people who tried to come inside. But that, security people, they were just civilians. They just said, no, we will keep it like that. Because Yanukovych had, by that moment, about 100 people who were, who secured this
area.
Yeah, 1,000 people actually. But it was from police, people from army. And in that moment when he left, he just told them, go home. And they left this residence without any security people. But local people, they organized. And when I came, it was a lot of people already there. It was early morning. And I told them that I'm from Gromadzki, and they told me, okay, you can go. So they let me in because I showed them that I was with camera, small camera for streaming. I told them that I will do stream from there. But when I came, first I saw it was like a greenhouse because he ate only food which was grown there. We suggest that he was afraid that he will be poisoned or something. And then I saw zoo
with animals,
with animals.
Tigers and panda. And
No, actually it was mostly horses or a lot of birds, big, small, like this, not pandas, zoo more for Ukrainian animals like that. And I was like, where I am? Where is this luxury place? But when I came, I go right, and on that side, it was not the most important buildings. They were on different side. So first, and I was streaming. I was on TV. That this Medjugorje look vegetables, look animals, and it was like, really, where Yanukovych lived? Why he lived there? But it's so big territory. There's
also a lake, right?
Yes, for going from one point from point A to point B in embankment, you should spend 40 minutes walk. It's 140 hectares.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's very big. So I didn't have the map of Medjugorje, and of course I just was walking how I imagined that.
Could you just describe the house where he was living, because it's quite impressive?
Yeah, you're right. It's very impressive. When I stayed there for 8 days and went to that big house, Honka, then I came back from my one-room apartment in Kiev, and I was like, why I live so poor life? Because when you stay for a few days in this, in this golden stuff with big rooms, and when you come back to your real life, why I live in poor person. But actually it was very ugly. Yanukovych why decided to make big sauna. So his house looked like big sauna. I mean, it was wood inside, wood outside. So everywhere. It was very, very expensive wood, with some, mosaic, all the stuff. Wood and gold. Then some lamps, a lot of elements of gold, a lot of very expensive furniture. He also had some small church in his house with, all these golden icons, so all the things. When we were using elevator in his house, elevator had kind of Swarovski diamonds.
Why do you need Swarovski diamonds in elevator?
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, so it's like you even can't imagine it's possible, but it was possible at that place. Dmitro Gnap, my colleague, called me and told me that there are some journalists who found documents. You should find the way to the leak. And I just went there and found it was like maybe 5 journalists at the moment who just took some documents, some papers, but it was wet papers. And they said, we found it there. And I think there are more documents into the leak. And we need to figure out how to get them.
So your hypothesis was that when Yanukovych was fleeing the country, he just took all the important incriminating documents and threw them into the lake.
Actually, we also saw some places where documents were burned. Mm-hmm. So they burned the most important documents. I took them took the documents from them. But some important documents, not so important, but some of them, we think that they put into the leak to destroy them.
So what did you do?
First, we were really happy that we found something. I can't imagine what might be more important for journalists than find thousands of documents. I felt like, I found some gold or something.
But it was wet and it was destroyed.
Yeah, but
there were more probably in the water.
Yeah, so we tried to call every investigative journalist who were really interested, because many journalists from news came. They just took pictures, doing like videos for like 2-minute stories at some journalists. Some found the documents and let's go there to zoo, to other places. Yeah, but it was like first it was about 10 journalists who were really focusing on figuring out what's the documents are, what numbers are there. We felt that it's something really important, but we couldn't start to work on them immediately because they were wet. And we knew that maybe it's something more, because some of journalists heard from local people that they saw that someone put folders with documents into the leak. So one of journalists somehow found scuba divers, like real scuba divers. And they came like in half an hour. I don't know, it was like magic. They came and we have this pictures, video, how they...
So they came in a full gear and
yes.
They just jump into the water, dive 20 meters and pull out the folders.
Absolutely. They worked also at night. Because I remember we have videos, they found some bullets also. It was some folders and some bullets, and I was filming that and I was streaming. But we stayed there. I stayed in Mazhigirya for 8 days. I just came there for doing this reporting and stayed there for 8 days.
Where did you live? Where did you sleep there?
We found we called it guest house. There were some locals who told us that there is some small guest house, you can stay there, work with documents. Because firstly, we worked on the place for boats, and it was very cold there. It was February, of course, it's just a place for putting like boats, because Yanukovych, of course, had some boats. And then we figured out that we need to stay with these documents. We can't leave them. We can't take them with us because it's not our documents. And some locals told us there are guest house, so we should go there with all the documents and slept there. And I remember because I didn't have like anywhere, and we found some room of director, of some manager of all this big complex, and he had like new shirts. And
so you just took the shirts and wear those?
I took white shirt. It was new, it was packed. And I just took it, and some days I was walking on that because I didn't have anything to wear, and I couldn't leave that place because when we figure out that we have a lot of documents and we needed to dry them, and we need to take pictures and make copies of them. That every hour, every minute was very, very important, and we couldn't leave the place.
So at the end, you have collected 25,000 documents. How do you dry 25,000 documents? It's a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot. At that guest house, we found a sauna. So we put some documents to sauna and just turn it on. And it was pretty. And we just put part of them and just then took them back, then put another part, took them back.
Did it work?
Yes, it worked. Also, we asked people to come to help us to dry documents, or at least to make copies of them, because some professionals from libraries, they came with this big stuff for drying documents. They told us that you have about 3 days before it will be destroying with water. We decided in first days that our main mission to make copies of them and just to put them to online for everyone who can see that.
And then you started to work on them and build stories. So what were the stories based on Yanukovych leaks?
We published, I think, 20, 30, 40 stories, like big stories about that. So mostly documents we found were about managing of Mezhygirya, of that complex, because we found that it was some administrative people, some tender committee, they were building, they were buying dogs, zoo, they were managing zoo, all this, buying food, all the stuff. So it was mostly documents and about price of furniture, price of building. So we published stories about companies, this network of companies around this Mezhygirya, which sending money, which were doing some reconstruction, building, all the stuff. And also we were able to figure out how much money Yanukovych spent for Mezhygirya. And in documents, we found how much it cost. So we could take picture of lamp and then see how much they paid for that. That's what was important for us, to figure out who, because of course Yanukovych for almost all his life, he was official. He was not able to get this money by legal way. So we saw how much money it was only for him, and also this big Honka house. Also, it was right next to it, like healthy spa complex for
like a wellness, private wellness.
Yeah, private wellness with barber shop, with all this, anti-age capsules.
Did it work?
Yeah, it worked. We saw in some notebooks, we saw his schedule for the day, and some of his assistants wrote it. We found a lot of these notebooks. And one of day, I remember that it was like solarium, sauna, then massage, and then one meeting with some person from government, and then again tennis.
Nice life.
Nice
Good life, right?
Yeah. And he really used all this anti-aging stuff. Also, they have their own gas station there, gasoline station, for...
Was it expensive, the gas, to buy a gas there?
It was for free, just for serving all this. Also, dog club. It was like a lot of dogs, mostly big dogs, from Asia. These big Asian dogs. Some of them were, it was like gifts from some people like Nazarbayev, the president, that time's president of Kazakhstan.
Did Yanukovych like dogs? Or was it just, to show off?
We also found some notes, some from internal documentation, when some person were writing that the Yanukovych came to a dog club and asked why some dog doesn't bark. And then they start to teach that dog to bark. It was internal documentation where people explained their bosses some mistakes or some wrongdoing, and one of case was about the dog which didn't bark. And then it makes more problem because it started bark a lot. So it was a crazy story. So what do we know about contacts between Yanukovych and dogs? Is that sometimes he came and asked why it barks, why it doesn't bark, or something like that. So if he loved dogs, we don't know, but sometimes he visited them. Also, he had place with ostriches. So
why?
We think that he ate them. It was 20, 30 ostriches there. So, but we believe that he ate eggs and he also ate
the meat
of ostriches, yeah. So a lot of very interesting, strange stuff we found there. But we were trying to focus on signals of corruption. So yeah, we were trying to calculate money. And we found out that for Mezhigirya, Yanukovych spent about 2 billion hryvnias. So we published all the stories, but the most important that we didn't find how money came to him. So we saw how he spent that money for all these dogs, zoo, ostriches, this sauna house. But I believe that he or his people destroyed the documents how that money came to him.
Do you think there were documents?
I'm sure, yeah. Everything was very well documented. We believe it was bribes or something, but most likely they destroyed the documents in the beginning, and we didn't able to find who bring him money.
What is now with Mezhigirya?
For almost 10 years, it was opened for people like park. You can come there, to walk there, to take a bike, all the things. Some people who doing weddings came there to take in pictures because it's a very nice place, actually. It's in mountains and lake there, and it's a lot of very nice trees, a lot of very nice flowers there. And we as journalists for many years we had Mezhigirya Fest there, it's journalism festival. But now, because of full-scale invasion, because of the big war, it's not possible to be there. It was some rocket came to the place, this Elling, where we had ceremony, where we had our conference, and where we start working, and it's destroyed. Now it's closed, and but now the state started caring about Mezhigirya, and we don't know what will be in future with that. People call it Museum of Corruption. It was very important for people to see.
You, let's say, lost the president, and now there must be new elections. Who was running in the upcoming elections?
It was a few people. One of the most the most powerful candidate who was in the end elected, it was Petro Poroshenko. He was a long-time politician who looked like patriotic person, and people liked him, and he gave a lot of promises. And he looked like patriotic person compared to Yanukovych, of course, and he was elected.
He was also a businessman.
Yes.
So then another huge project with a huge impact came called Panama Papers. And you followed your president. And what did you discover?
Yeah, Panama Papers... when it was first project, big project, I was participated as journalist, and I was like, wow.
It was 2016, I guess.
It started 2015, and we published in 2016. And I was like, wow, it's the best journalists around the world, and I'm with them. What can I bring from Ukraine? But of course, when you have this databases, you start from first names, and first name was president names, and I just searched Poroshenko, and I found that very few months ago, before I found that, he by himself established company in BVI, British Virgin Islands. without this database, it was never been possible to discover it. Because BVI, one of offshore jurisdiction where all documents are closed from people, and it's not possible to journalists, to other people to find that documents. So what we saw when I worked for like 8 months before publishing, and we found out that in few months after election, Yanukovych established that company, and it was like a few offshore companies in BVI, Cyprus, other European countries, and we found some emailing between lawyers of Poroshenko, and of course we are journalists, we are not offshore professionals, and it was challenge to find people who can explain what's going on, what does it mean, all these words, and we figure out that that structure which Poroshenko built already as president, it looked like structure for selling the company, but with avoiding taxes in Ukraine. By that moment, his confectionery empire cost about between 2 and 4 billion euros or dollars. And we saw through that companies that it was prepared for selling without paying taxes in Ukraine, which was pretty...
Yeah, it's a wrong message if you are the president that you don't want to pay taxes, right?
Yeah.
Was he happy about your reporting, or did it have any impact, like very visible?
I think for my journalistic career, it was the biggest attack against me, against our organization for 2-3 months. Storm when people attacked.
Shitstorm, we can say.
Shitstorm, yeah, it was shitstorm. I was not prepared to that because at that times I thought that as journalist you publish story and then you can go to vacation. But after that story, I realized you publish story and you should be ready to protect, to support your story, to fight for your story, go to TV, go to explain what it means, because usually as investigators we publish complicated stories. It was a lot of attacks, it was many bot farms. We called them Porocho bots, because Poroshenko, these bots who, it was like not real people who just texted like bad stuff about you. And
could you give example of what they wrote about you?
They wrote me that I'm a young woman, I can't figure out with so complicated stuff, I should go to kitchen and care about kids, and I don't know about what I'm talking, I'm too stupid to figure out with so complicated stuff with this hard man's word and I'm not able to do that. That was like kind of direction. That also it was some like a friendly meeting. I met with some my former colleagues or people I knew volunteers, and they told me stop doing this because you have a kid. My daughter was 1 year old by that moment, and they told me no, you are not in good position, focusing on some other stuff, better for you, don't do this. I can say that it was not like something to scare me, but it looked like friendly recommendation, just stop working on this story. But then I figure out who sends it, people to advise me, because it was not fact mistakes there, because Poroshenko has pretty good lawyers, had at that time and has now. If it was any mistake, he would sue us, he would destroy me, reputation of organization. But we worked as part of international community, we worked with OCCRP, and it was fact-checked very good. So it was absolutely no fact problem, and they tried to find like problem with form.
Did you doubt yourself during the process? Did you doubt the story?
I didn't doubt with facts, because I knew that he created offshore, but I doubt a lot about storytelling, because really if I knew that this is part of attacks against us, but for me it was chance to look better on details, how I work, how I tell my stories. And before that, I think in Ukraine, journalists and me as well, we didn't think about storytelling. We just find information and just produce it how we imagine. And after that, I start go to some trainings, ask our colleagues from Sweden to help us to tell complicated stories, how to tell the stories, because I knew that, of course, it was part of attack. But for me, as a journalist, very important to be as clear as possible and don't leave the space for manipulation for people who are against the story.
Talking about presidents, your very close colleague and co-founder of Slidstvo, Dmytro Gnap. He was also running for the president, and it really put you into a difficult spot. So what was going on?